Right now, somewhere in the UK, a person walks out of a local pharmacy carrying a tiny plastic bottle of generic blood pressure pills. They paid nothing, or maybe just a standard prescription fee of under £10. To the average patient, this looks like a simple, low-cost community service. But behind that single counter, an invisible financial engine just moved millions of pounds, and almost nobody realizes how it actually happened. You see, most people believe high street pharmacies are just retail shops that happen to sell medicine. They assume the money comes from selling toothpaste, expensive face creams, and over-the-counter painkillers. But that entire mental model is completely wrong. In fact, if a high street pharmacy relied only on traditional retail sales, it would go bankrupt in less than 90 days. So, where does the real money come from? How do these quiet, ordinary storefronts manage to generate billions in revenue, year after year? Even during massive economic downturns, to solve this financial mystery, we have to perform a forensic audit on a single, ordinary pill. Following every penny from a factory floor halfway across the world, directly into the hidden accounts of a UK pharmacy empire, let us trace a real-world case study. Take a basic generic cholesterol medication called atorvastatin. The actual cost to manufacture a box of 30 pills in an automated chemical facility in India or China is astonishingly low. We are talking about less than 40 pence by the time that box is packaged, shipped across oceans, and lands in a UK distribution warehouse. The total baseline cost sits at roughly 60 pence. So, how does a 60-pence box of generic medicine turn into a massive revenue engine? This brings us to the first major layer of the system, the reimbursement game. You see, when a pharmacist hands you that prescribed box, they do not bill you for the real cost. They bill the National Health Service. Now, here is where the money's secret begins to unravel. The state does not pay the pharmacy what the store actually spent on the drug. Instead, the state pays a fixed standard rate listed on an official document called the drug tariff. For our box of atorvastatin, that official tariff price might be listed at £6. Think about that gap for a moment. The official state benchmark says the drug is worth £6. But a smart corporate pharmacy group buying millions of units at a time does not pay £6. They use their gigantic buying power to negotiate directly with wholesale suppliers, acquiring that exact same box for just 80 pence. When the pharmacy submits the claim to the state, they receive the official tariff rate of £6. The 80 pence purchase cost is covered, leaving a staggering margin of over £5 on a single routine prescription. Multiply that micro margin by the hundreds of millions of prescriptions dispensed across the country every single year, and suddenly, you begin to see the outline of a massive, hidden money engine. But wait, if it was really that simple, wouldn't everyone open a pharmacy and print free money? Why aren't thousands of new competitors popping up on every corner to steal those massive profit margins? Because the system protects itself through a legal moat that almost no ordinary consumer knows exists. It is called the control of entry regulations, or more simply, the location barrier. In the UK, you cannot just lease an empty retail store, hire a certified pharmacist, and start dispensing state-funded medication. To open a new pharmacy, you must prove to regulatory authorities that a genuine market need exists in that specific neighborhood, and that existing stores cannot fulfill it. If a competitor tries to set up shop near an established location, the existing pharmacy can legally challenge the application. They use geographic buffer zones, often measuring hundreds of meters, to block rivals from opening nearby. This single legal mechanism turns existing high street pharmacies into regional healthcare monopolies. They are not just retail businesses, they are protected toll booths on the road to human health. Once a company holds a licensed location, they effectively control the legal right to collect government healthcare payouts for that entire neighborhood. Yet, just as this model sounds completely bulletproof, a dangerous financial trap enters the picture. What happens when the government realizes it is paying £6 for a drug that only costs 80 pence to buy? This brings us to the most lethal financial threat in the industry, the dreaded retroactive clawback. The government knows these hidden margins exist. So, every year, state auditors perform detailed financial checks across the supply chain. If they discover pharmacies are making excessive profits on certain generic medications, the state automatically slashes the tariff price for the following quarter, or demands millions of pounds in direct financial repayments. Imagine running a business where you make a solid profit today, only for your main customer to audit your books 12 months later and demand millions of pounds back. This exact clawback mechanism has wiped out hundreds of independent pharmacies over the last decade, pushing small business owners to the absolute brink of ruin. So, how do the biggest corporate giants survive this brutal margin squeeze? How do they keep pulling in billions when the government constantly works to cut their reimbursement rates? They deploy a brilliant, multi-layered business strategy, turning their stores into high-yield retail traps. Step inside any major high-street pharmacy and observe the floor layout carefully. Where is the prescription counter located? It is almost never near the front door. It is positioned at the very back of the store. To collect your medicine, you are forced to walk through long, narrow aisles lined with high-margin products. Expensive skincare, luxury fragrances, seasonal vitamins, and baby supplies. And here is the psychological genius of it. When people enter a pharmacy, they are already in a health-conscious state of mind. Their psychological defense mechanisms against spending money are naturally lowered. A customer waiting 10 minutes for a prescription to be filled will routinely pick up an 8-pound tube of branded cream. A product that carries a profit margin far higher than the prescription itself. The state-funded prescription brings the customer through the door for free, and the front-of-store retail engine extracts the high-margin profit. But the strategy goes even deeper than retail upsells. In recent years, the ultimate pivot has begun, the transition from product seller to private clinical service provider. As prescription margins continue to tighten, corporate pharmacy chains are quietly transforming their physical space into mini private hospitals. They no longer want to just hand you a bottle of pills. They want to deliver the care directly. Think about what you see on the high street today. Travel vaccination clinics, private blood testing, ear wax removal, weight loss management, and aesthetic treatments. A traditional prescription might yield a couple of pounds in net profit after labor costs, but a 15-minute private travel vaccination can net 30, 40, or 50 pounds in clear profit. By shifting from state-reimbursed dispensing to direct-to-consumer private healthcare, high-street pharmacies are bypassing the government's pricing controls entirely. They are taking the trust built through state healthcare and monetizing it in the private cash market. And yet, as lucrative as this transformation sounds, an even bigger threat is quietly lurking in the shadows. A technological disruption that could render the entire physical high street obsolete. Enter the digital mail-order pharmacy, giant automated fulfillment centers, powered by advanced robotics and artificial intelligence, are now capable of processing, packing, and dispatching tens of thousands of prescriptions every single hour. Without the massive overhead costs of high-street rent, expensive electricity bills, and local store staffing, these digital platforms can operate on margins that traditional physical stores simply cannot match. If a patient can tap 3 buttons on their smartphone and have their repeat medication delivered directly to their front door for free, why would they ever walk down to the high street again? This brings us to the ultimate business lesson behind the entire pharmacy industry. A profound reality that applies to almost every sector in the global economy. A business model built purely on convenience and physical location is always vulnerable to digital disruption. But a business model built on human trust, physical care, and critical infrastructure becomes nearly impossible to replace. The UK high street pharmacy did not become a multi-billion-pound industry merely by selling cheap generic pills or overpriced shampoo. It built an empire by positioning itself at the absolute intersection of government funding, supply chain arbitrage, physical access, and human vulnerability. The stores that survive the next decade will not be the ones with the brightest retail aisles or the largest selection of cosmetics. They will be the ones that successfully convert their physical presence into indispensable local clinical hubs. In the end, the humble neighborhood pharmacy is not just a place where you pick up a prescription. It is a masterclass in how invisible supply chains, smart regulatory positioning, and subtle human psychology can turn an ordinary 60-pence pill into one of the most powerful, resilient economic machines on Earth.